Minerva McGonagall had spent 11 hours perched on a garden wall in the guise of a tabby cat, and everything she had witnessed had only deepened her certainty. She had watched Vernon Dursley lumber toward his car that morning, nearly kicking her without a second thought. She had observed Petunia Dursley haunting her own windows, her thin face twisting with poorly concealed disdain every time an owl swept overhead. She had witnessed young Dudley Dursley collapse into a spectacular tantrum over a broken toy, his face purpling while his mother rushed to soothe him with practiced indulgence. By the time the November darkness had fully settled over Privet Drive, Minerva's conviction had hardened into something unbreakable. These were entirely the wrong people to raise Lily Potter's son. When Dumbledore appeared at the corner in his sweeping purple robes, Minerva transformed and confronted him before he could speak a single word. "How could you, Albus?" Her voice carried a controlled fury she rarely allowed herself. "I've watched them all day, every hour of it. Vernon Dursley is a bully and a bore. His wife spent 10 minutes staring at a perfectly ordinary owl with such naked contempt that I thought she might hex it herself, if she only had the ability. And that child, Dudley, is the most thoroughly unpleasant boy I have encountered in 30 years of teaching." Dumbledore greeted her with characteristic mildness. "Good evening, Minerva. I see you've been conducting reconnaissance. I've been watching you make a catastrophic mistake." She didn't soften the words. Lily Potter died protecting her son. Died. And your solution is to deliver him to her sister, a woman who hadn't spoken to Lily in years, who resented her magical gift from the moment the Hogwarts letter arrived. This is your plan. Dumbledore began to speak about the blood protection. Minerva cut him off, something she almost never did. "I understand the blood protection perfectly. You explained it thoroughly. Lily's sacrifice created ancient magic, extraordinarily powerful, which will shield Harry so long as he can call his aunt's home his own. I've absorbed every word of that explanation." She drew herself up to her full considerable height, her voice sharpening further. "But Albus, I have watched how these people live. That house will never be home to Harry. He'll be an obligation to them, a reminder of everything they've chosen to resent, a target for their fear and their contempt. Nevertheless, no." The single syllable fell between them like a dropped blade. "Albus Dumbledore, I have followed your leadership without question through decades of darkness. During the war, I trusted your strategies even when they seemed bordering on madness. I have never, not once, refused a direct request from you. But this I cannot accept. I will not accept it." The familiar twinkle faded from Dumbledore's eyes. In its place was something more measured, more genuinely attentive. "Have you actually looked at Petunia Dursley's face when she sees a broomstick?" Minerva pressed. "Have you seen what Vernon Dursley's contempt for anything outside his narrow definition of normal does to the air around him? Lily was my student for 7 years. I watched her develop from a curious, luminously talented child into one of the most remarkable witches I ever had the privilege of teaching. I mourned her death as I have mourned very few things, and I will not, I absolutely will not, surrender her son to people who will teach him to despise his own nature." "The protection cannot be dismissed," Dumbledore said quietly. "Without Petunia taking him in, the blood charm fails. Voldemort's followers will come for him, Minerva. They'll want revenge. Some of them will want to finish what their master began. Then we create alternative protections." Her answer came without hesitation. "You are the greatest wizard alive. I am not without considerable skill myself. We layer enchantments, a Fidelius charm on my cottage, blood wards keyed to my guardianship of Lily's child, every protective magic we can devise. We do the work, Albus, but I will not leave him here." A long silence stretched between them. Dumbledore studied her with those penetrating blue eyes that had always seen rather more than most people intended to reveal. "You're proposing to adopt him," he said at last, "to take Harry Potter as your ward." "Yes. You are unmarried, Minerva. Your career is demanding by any measure. You have never, in all the years I have known you, expressed the slightest interest in raising children. I have taught children for 30 years. I understand them perfectly well. Teaching and parenting are vastly different undertakings. Then I'll learn." Her voice carried the absolute finality she reserved for matters already decided. "I learned to become an animagus. I learned to fight Death Eaters. I have learned to run this school in your absence. I am entirely capable of learning to raise one child. It isn't. Nothing worthwhile is simple." She allowed her tone to soften by the smallest degree. "Albus, I'm not requesting your permission. I'm informing you of my decision. If you place Harry Potter on that doorstep, I will retrieve him the moment you've gone. I'll take him to my cottage in Hogsmeade and raise him myself. You can help me establish proper protections, or I'll research them independently. But that child is not spending one unnecessary moment in proximity to people who will despise him for existing." Dumbledore was silent for quite a long time. Then, unexpectedly, the ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You care for him already," he observed. "James and Lily's son. You had very little patience for James Potter as a student. All that rule-breaking, all that deliberate spectacle, and yet you would die for his child." "I would die for any child who needed protection," Minerva said. "But yes, Lily she was exceptional, brilliant and kind, and everything a witch ought to aspire to become. Her son deserves better than this. And if I forbid it—" Minerva met his gaze without flinching. "Then you had better intend to enforce that prohibition with magic, because I will not comply." It was perhaps the first time in decades that Minerva McGonagall had directly defied Albus Dumbledore. To his credit, he recognized the moment for precisely what it was, an immovable object meeting an unstoppable force. He capitulated with grace. "Very well," he said quietly. "We'll need to move quickly. Petunia must still receive a letter explaining what has happened to Lily. She deserves to know her sister is dead, whatever her feelings about magic may be. But Harry will not remain here." He paused. "Prepare yourself, Minerva. You'll be scrutinized. Every decision you make regarding his upbringing will be examined and questioned." "Let them question," she replied. "I'll answer with results." Hagrid arrived minutes later on Sirius Black's motorcycle, his great face streaked with tears, cradling a bundle of blankets against his chest. The baby within was sleeping peacefully, a small lightning bolt cut visible beneath a shock of untidy black hair. "Professor McGonagall," Hagrid rumbled, his voice thick with grief. "Little Harry, can ye believe it? Lily and James gone, and this little boy survived you-know-who." "Give him to me, Hagrid," Minerva said gently. Hagrid transferred the child with extraordinary care. Minerva looked down at Harry Potter, 15 months old, impossibly small, bearing the scar that marked him as the boy who lived, and felt something shift in her chest. Something permanent. He had James's unruly black hair, James's small, stubborn nose, but when his eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, they were Lily's eyes, impossibly green, bright even in the November dark. "Hello, Harry," Minerva whispered. "I'm going to take care of you now. I promise." Harry made a small, contented sound and closed his eyes again, apparently unbothered by the change in guardian. They left Privet Drive behind, Minerva carrying Harry, Dumbledore walking beside her, both disappearing with quiet cracks of apparition once they'd cleared the wards. They reappeared in Hogsmeade outside Minerva's cottage, a neat stone building with a thatched roof and a garden dormant in the November cold. She had purchased it years ago as a private retreat from the demands of Hogwarts. It had never been intended for a child. She looked at it now with entirely new eyes. "One step at a time," Dumbledore said, reading her expression with his usual unsettling accuracy. "First, the protections, then the legalities. Then you can worry about practical parenting." They spent the next 6 hours layering enchantments onto the cottage. Dumbledore cast the Fidelius charm with Minerva as secret keeper, rendering the house invisible and unplottable to anyone she hadn't personally informed of its location. Together they worked on blood wards, adapting the ancient magic to recognize Minerva's accepted guardianship of Lily's son as sufficient to maintain some measure of the protective power Lily's sacrifice had created. It wasn't as strong as living with Petunia would have been. Dumbledore was honest about that, but combined with the Fidelius and the additional defensive enchantments they layered on top, it would keep Harry safer than most children in Britain. He'll still be vulnerable outside these wards, Dumbledore warned as dawn began to grey the sky. In Diagon Alley, at Hogwarts eventually. Anywhere public where Death Eaters might recognize him. Then I'll teach him to defend himself. He's 15 months old, Minerva. Then I have time to prepare. She looked down at Harry, still sleeping in the conjured bassinet Dumbledore had produced. Soft blue fabric, warming charms already humming quietly. She felt the weight of what she'd undertaken settle fully around her, not as a burden, as a responsibility she had chosen with her whole self. "I know this is irregular," she said quietly. "I know it complicates things considerably, but Albus, I know in my bones this is right. This boy deserves more than survival. He deserves a childhood, an education, love, even if I'm not particularly demonstrative about it." "I believe you'll surprise yourself on that last point," Dumbledore said gently. "Children have a way of reaching places in our hearts we didn't know existed." After he left, Minerva stood watching Harry sleep. She had taught thousands of students. She had fought in a war. She had mastered magic that most witches never attempted. But she had never been responsible for a life this young, this vulnerable, this irreplaceable. "Your mother was one of the brightest witches I ever taught," she whispered to the sleeping child. "Your father was, well, he was James Potter, infuriating and reckless, but brave when it mattered. And you survived something impossible." She reached down and carefully tucked one small escaped fist back beneath the blankets. "Welcome home, Harry Potter. I promise you this will be a better home than the one Dumbledore planned." With that promise, Minerva McGonagall became a mother. The first year, learning to parent. The next morning introduced chaos that Minerva had entirely failed to anticipate. Harry woke at 5 o'clock, crying. Minerva, who had been sleeping with the light vigilance of someone braced for emergencies, rushed to the bassinet and stood staring at the screaming infant with something that approached genuine panic. Was he hurt? Ill? In danger? Her first instinct, sharp, authoritative, almost comic in retrospect, was to say, "Shh," in her usual classroom voice. Harry predictably cried harder. She lifted him carefully, supporting his head the way she vaguely recalled from observing mothers with young children over the years. He felt impossibly light, impossibly fragile. He also smelled unmistakably of a problem that required immediate practical solution. Minerva McGonagall had never changed a nappy in her life. She was a transfiguration master who could turn a writing desk into a pig and back again in under 3 seconds. She had performed magic that left grown wizards breathless with admiration. She had absolutely no idea how to change a nappy. "Right," she said aloud, with the crisp determination she brought to all new challenges. "Logically, there is a process. The nappy comes off, one cleans the child, a new nappy goes on. Simple enough. It was not simple. 20 minutes later, she had produced a result that was crooked, probably too loose, and possibly alarming by any objective standard. She had vanished the soiled nappy with perhaps more force than strictly necessary. Harry, mercifully, had stopped crying and was studying her with those enormous green eyes in a manner she found faintly judgmental. "You're hungry," she said. "Obviously, but I haven't. I need to purchase supplies, food appropriate for infants, properly fitting clothes, everything really." Harry made a small sound that might, charitably, have been agreement. By the time shops would open in Diagon Alley, Minerva had surveyed her kitchen with mounting dismay. Tea, biscuits, leftover shepherd's pie from 2 days prior, and a singular, rather defeated-looking apple. None of it remotely appropriate for a 15-month-old child. "This is absurd," she announced to Harry, who was industriously chewing on his own fist. "I have defended Hogwarts from Death Eaters. I have taught transfiguration to students who could barely pronounce the word. And I am being defeated by the question of what to feed an infant." She flew to Hogwarts, awkwardly, holding Harry against her with one arm while managing her broom with the other, and went directly to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey looked up from her morning preparations and froze. "Minerva, what? Is that a baby?" "This is Harry Potter," Minerva said, with the dignified composure of someone who had not just arrived via broomstick clutching an infant. "I have assumed guardianship of him, and I need advice. About feeding him, about all of it. Poppy's expression shifted immediately from shock to warm, practical efficiency. She settled Minerva into a chair and spent the next hour teaching her the fundamentals, appropriate foods for a child Harry's age, the correct technique for nappy changes. Minerva's effort had indeed been, as Poppy put it diplomatically, creative. What sleep schedule to expect, signs of illness, and everything else a new parent needed urgently to know. "You should have planned this more thoroughly before taking him," Poppy said, though her tone was gentle rather than reproachful. "But Minerva, this is a kind thing you're doing. It's brave too. I didn't do it to be kind or brave. I did it because the alternative was unacceptable. That's precisely why it's kind." Poppy conjured a detailed list. The trip to Diagon Alley that morning yielded a proper crib, with safety enchantments built in. Clothes in multiple sizes because children grew at alarming speed. Toys designed to engage developing magical ability. Feeding equipment, and several books on child development that the cheerful shopkeeper at Wee Wizards insisted were absolutely essential. "You're very brave," the shopkeeper said as Minerva paid, "raising him on your own. He's famous, everyone knows that, but he's also just a baby who needs someone to care for him properly. You're doing a wonderful thing." "I'm doing what's necessary," Minerva corrected. But she felt an unfamiliar warmth at the words regardless. The cottage transformation took the whole of that afternoon. Minerva transfigured the spare bedroom into something suitable. Blue walls on the principle that they were supposedly calming, enchanted stars across the ceiling that shifted slowly through the night sky, protective wards layered onto the window glass, the new crib positioned where she would hear Harry if he stirred. She stepped back to survey the result. "A proper room for a proper child," she said. "What do you think, Harry?" Harry, seated on the floor playing with a set of self-stacking enchanted blocks, ignored her completely. "Typical," Minerva muttered. "I create a magically sophisticated nursery, and you prefer blocks." That evening, after Harry had been fed, mashed banana, which he ate with considerable enthusiasm, and equally considerable mess, and bathed, another adventure in applied learning, and tucked into his crib, Minerva sat in her study and tried to process the full weight of what she had done. She had adopted Harry Potter, the most famous child in the wizarding world. She had absolutely no certainty that she was doing any of it correctly. "You'll learn," she told herself. "You learn this too." From the nursery came a small plaintive sound. She was on her feet immediately, wand in hand, ready for threats. Harry had dropped his stuffed owl outside the crib and was reaching for it with the specific, solemn tragedy of a child who has lost something precious. Minerva retrieved the toy and handed it back. Harry clutched it and looked up at her steadily. "Your mother would do this better," Minerva said quietly. She was warm, kind, everything I'm not, particularly. "But Harry, I promise you this. I'll keep you safe. I'll teach you magic. I'll make certain you grow up knowing you're valued. That will have to be enough." Harry yawned and closed his eyes, apparently satisfied. Minerva stood watching him sleep for a long moment. Then she returned to her study and began researching the next challenge: formal legal guardianship and the inevitable scrutiny of the ministry. The Gringotts' visit, arranged with Dumbledore via Flu the following morning, produced 2 hours of paperwork requiring magical oaths. She would act in Harry's best interests, would not exploit his fame or his inheritance, would provide appropriate care and education, and a goblin named Griffook, who examined the entire arrangement with professional skepticism before finalizing it with the pronouncement, "Professor Minerva McGonagall is now the legal magical guardian of Harry James Potter." The ministry notification arrived by owl that same evening, a formal letter informing her that a home inspection would be conducted within the week. "Of course there will be," Minerva muttered. "Bureaucrats." She spent the next 3 days preparing with characteristic thoroughness. The inspector, a severe witch from the Department of Magical Children's Services named Madame Hopkirk, examined every room, questioned every arrangement, and challenged every choice. "You're unmarried, employed full-time, no prior experience raising children." "I have taught children for 3 decades, Minerva replied crisply. "I understand child development, educational needs, and appropriate discipline comprehensively." Teaching and parenting are different, so I've been told. Nevertheless, I am committed to providing Harry with excellent care. Madam Hopkirk reviewed the nursery, the safety wards, Minerva's financial records, and her detailed schedule for Harry's care. Mornings at the cottage with the house elf, Dumbledore had insisted upon assigning, over Minerva's initial and fairly strenuous objections. Afternoons at Hogwarts, under the supervision of various staff members, evenings and weekends with Minerva exclusively. It's unorthodox, Madam Hopkirk said at last. But Professor McGonagall, you are clearly committed, and frankly, given the alternatives, the Dursleys have already declined guardianship in writing, stating they want nothing to do with that world. You are the best available option. Guardianship approved, subject to annual reviews. After the inspector left, Minerva sank into her armchair with relief so profound she had to breathe through it carefully. We passed, she told Harry, who was playing with his blocks again. You're officially mine, or I'm officially yours. However one phrases these things. Harry looked up at her and smiled. A real deliberate smile, his first since she'd taken him. And Minerva McGonagall, who had never considered herself a particularly emotional woman, found her eyes stinging with tears she had absolutely no intention of shedding. Right then, she said, pulling herself together with brisk efficiency. Enough sentiment. It's time for dinner, and then we'll begin your magical education. You are never too young to learn basic transfiguration theory. Harry gurgled happily. Despite herself, Minerva smiled. I think we're going to manage quite well, you and I. By the time Harry Potter turned 2, he had settled into a routine that would have impressed even the most rigorously organized of parents. 6 o'clock, wake up, with the punctuality of someone who had absorbed Minerva's attitude toward timekeeping by simple proximity. 6:30, breakfast with Minerva, weak tea included, because Minerva held firm opinions about proper British habits beginning early. 7 o'clock, morning lessons, currently consisting of picture books about magical creatures and basic arithmetic. 9 o'clock, playtime in the cottage garden while Minerva prepared her teaching materials. 11 o'clock, nap. 2 o'clock, the trip to Hogwarts, where Harry would spend his afternoons in Minerva's office or drifting between various professors who had adopted him as a collective responsibility. 6 o'clock, dinner. 7 o'clock, bath and bedtime story. 8 o'clock, sleep. You've created a tiny soldier, Poppy Pomfrey observed one afternoon, watching 2-year-old Harry sit with remarkable stillness in Minerva's office, carefully turning the pages of a basic transfiguration text he couldn't possibly comprehend yet. I've created a disciplined child, Minerva corrected. Structure matters, Poppy. Children thrive on consistency. Children also thrive on spontaneity and play. He has precisely 1 hour of play each morning, and again in the evenings when appropriate. Poppy shook her head, but she was smiling. Only you could apply military precision to raising a toddler. Though I'll admit, he does seem happy enough. Harry was, in his particular way, genuinely happy. He had no basis for comparison, no awareness that other households might operate with more chaos, more leniency, more toys scattered across every available surface. What he knew was that Minerva was consistent, present, and, while not effusively affectionate, unmistakably devoted to his well-being. When he fell and scraped his knee at 18 months, she had been there instantly, cleaning the wound with practiced efficiency and a quiet healing charm. When nightmares woke him screaming at 20 months, he couldn't articulate what frightened him, only that something did. Minerva sat beside his crib and read aloud from transfiguration texts in a measured, steady voice, until the sound of it settled him back to sleep. When he took his first unsteady steps at 14 months, she had actually smiled. A real, genuine, unguarded smile of pure pride. "Well done, Harry," she had said. "Excellent coordination. We'll have you on a broomstick in no time." By age 3, Harry could recite the basic principles of transfiguration: intent, precise movement, and magical focus. Identify 15 common magical creatures from illustrations, and sit quietly for up to an hour while Minerva worked. An impressive achievement for any toddler, though Minerva accepted it as a reasonable baseline. He had also developed a personality that was distinctly and unmistakably his own. regardless of Minerva's structured approach. "No," Harry said firmly one evening, confronted with his plate of vegetables. "Harry, you need to eat your greens. They are essential for proper development." "No, thank you," Harry amended, apparently having absorbed some portion of Minerva's emphasis on courtesy even while refusing her instructions. "It isn't optional." Harry looked at her with Lily's green eyes, and Minerva felt her resolve waver by a fraction, before she recalled clearly what the parenting books said about consistency. 3 bites, she negotiated. 3 bites of vegetables, and then you may have pudding. Harry considered this with the gravity of a small person evaluating the terms of an important contract. 2 bites. Where did you learn to negotiate? Uncle Fierce, Harry said proudly, beaming. Minerva made a mental note to have a very pointed conversation with Professor Flitwick. 3 bites. Final offer. Harry sighed with theatrical depth. She had no idea where he'd learned that either. And ate his vegetables. Despite herself, Minerva found that toddlers didn't respond particularly well to lectures about proper conduct. They responded to consistency, certainly, but also to patience, and occasionally to creative solutions that she never would have considered prior to parenthood. When Harry refused to stay in his crib at age 2, climbing out repeatedly with an ingenuity that was probably, she noted, inherited from James, Minerva didn't punish. She transfigured the crib into a proper bed with enchanted safety railings, sat down with Harry, and explained, "You're growing up. This is a big boy's bed. Part of being a big boy is staying in it at night. Understood?" Harry, thoroughly pleased by the designation, stayed. When Harry had a genuine tantrum at age 3 over not being permitted to touch her wand, Minerva waited in patient silence while he exhausted himself, then settled down beside him and explained with perfect calm, "Magic requires control. Your magic is already quite strong. I can feel it. But you are not yet old enough to channel it safely through a wand. When you're older, you'll have your own. Until then, touching mine could hurt you or someone else." She paused. "Do you understand?" Harry sniffled. "When can I have a wand?" "When you are 11 and attend Hogwarts. That's forever. It's 8 years. It will pass quickly, I assure you." By age 4, Harry was spending more of his waking hours at Hogwarts than at the cottage. Minerva had established a dedicated corner of her office. Comfortable chair, carefully selected books, educational toys, defensive wards on the window, where Harry could occupy himself while she taught or attended the interminable meetings that came with being deputy headmistress. The staff of Hogwarts had, without any formal arrangement, become his extended family. Professor Flitwick taught him levitation theory with cheerful enthusiasm. Delighted to have such an attentive small student, Professor Sprout let him help water plants in the greenhouses, explaining each magical specimen's properties with patient detail. Hagrid visited specifically to see Harry, arriving at Minerva's office bearing treacle fudge and stories about magical creatures that were probably, Minerva acknowledged privately, several years too advanced for a 4-year-old, but that Harry absorbed with enormous eyes and absolute fascination regardless. And then there was Professor Snape. Harry's first encounter with Severus Snape had occurred when Harry was 2. Minerva had brought him to a staff meeting after a childcare arrangement fell through, and Harry had toddled into the room ahead of her and stopped in the middle of it, examining everything with the open, assessing curiosity that characterized all his explorations. Snape had stared at the child with an expression Minerva couldn't entirely read. Shock, certainly, some complex, barely contained pain. And something else, recognition perhaps. He had looked at James Potter's son and seen both too much and something he hadn't expected. "Potter," Snape had said very quietly. "Professor Snape," Minerva had replied, with the particular precision she used to signal the end of a line of inquiry. "Harry, this is Professor Snape. He teaches potions." Harry, at 2, had simply stared at the tall, dark-haired man with complete openness, cataloguing him without any evident concern. "He has her eyes," Snape had said, so quietly Minerva almost missed it. "Yes, he does." They hadn't spoken further that day, but as Harry grew older and spent more time at Hogwarts, encounters became inevitable. One afternoon, when Harry was 4, Minerva was searching the castle for him. He had slipped out of her office with the unerring instinct of small children for finding the most complicated possible route between any 2 points, and found him in the potions classroom, standing very still near the door while Snape prepared ingredients for a lesson. "You shouldn't be here," Snape said without looking up. "This classroom is dangerous for children." "I'm sorry," Harry said politely. Minerva's influence was audible even at a distance. "I was exploring." Snape looked up then. "Exploring into a laboratory where a single wrong contact could kill you." "I didn't touch anything," Harry pointed out. "A fact that likely saved your life." Snape moved to position himself between Harry and the ingredients, blocking access with his body without making it obvious he was doing so. "Go back to Professor McGonagall." "Are you friends with my mum?" Harry asked instead. Snape went very still. "Your mother is dead," he said. "I know. But were you friends before?" A long pause. "Yes," Snape said at last. "We were friends. A very long time ago." "What was she like?" "Brilliant." The word came without hesitation. "Kind. Far better than most people deserved." His voice was carefully, precisely neutral. "Now go, before Professor McGonagall concludes I've done something to you and holds me responsible for it." Harry left, but when Minerva found him 5 minutes later, his first question was, "Did Professor Snape really know my mum?" "They attended Hogwarts together," Minerva confirmed. "Why?" He said she was brilliant and kind. "She was both those things, also brave and loyal and strong." Minerva knelt to Harry's level. "Professor Snape knew both your parents, Harry. He and your father were not friends. They were enemies in point of fact, and that history matters to him, even though it has nothing whatsoever to do with you. If he seems cold or distant, that is why. Not because of anything you've done, because I look like my dad. You have your father's hair and face, yes, but you have your mother's eyes." She held his gaze steadily. "And I hope her character. Be patient with Professor Snape. He is complicated. Most people worth knowing are..." At age 5, Harry experienced his first significant accidental magic. Minerva had taken him to Diagon Alley for new robes. He was growing rapidly enough that keeping him properly dressed required quarterly expeditions. While she was speaking with a shopkeeper, 3 older children approached Harry with the particular proprietary excitement of people who feel that famous individuals owe them access. "You're Harry Potter, the famous one." "Just Harry," he said, with the measured politeness Minerva had drilled into him. "Can I help you with something?" "Show us your scar." "No, thank you. It's private." "Why?" "You're famous. Famous people share things." "My guardian has taught me," Harry said with careful precision, "that fame is not the same as belonging to everyone. Please leave me alone." They crowded closer. One reached toward his hair to push it aside himself. Harry's magic erupted. Not violently. He was only 5, and his control was still largely involuntary, but decisively. Every item of clothing throughout the entire shop transformed simultaneously to deep scarlet and gold. The children stumbled backward, startled into retreat. Harry stood in the center of it all, breathing hard, his green eyes bright with the particular mixture of anger and fear that had triggered the outburst. Minerva was beside him. In an instant. "It's all right. You're safe. Breathe with me. In and out." There, she turned to the retreating children with an expression that could have stopped a charging hippogriff. "You will not touch him. You will not make demands of him. You will leave this shop immediately, or I will speak to your parents at considerable length about appropriate behavior toward other people's children. Am I understood?" The children departed at speed. Minerva crouched beside Harry, who was still trembling faintly. "You had an accidental magic outburst. It happens when young wizards experience strong emotion. You are not in trouble." "I scared them," Harry whispered. "They frightened you first. You defended yourself, which is appropriate, though we will absolutely work on channeling that reaction more precisely as you grow." She pulled him into a brief, firm hug, which she didn't do often enough, and was aware of it. "You did nothing wrong. They crossed a boundary, and your magic responded to protect you. That's what magic does, when your heart and mind are aligned." That evening, Minerva began teaching Harry meditation techniques, simple breathing exercises to help him recognize emotional states before they reached a point of magical expression. Magic responds to emotion, she explained. Fear, anger, joy. All of these can and will trigger accidental outbursts if left unchecked. But if you learn to recognize what you are feeling, and if you practice bringing yourself calm deliberately, you can prevent those outbursts before they occur. She paused. More importantly, you can choose when your magic acts rather than simply reacting. Will I always have magic? Harry asked. Yes. You're a wizard, Harry. Magic is part of your nature. It is not something that can be removed or denied. And you are going to be a powerful wizard. I can feel the potential in you already. But power without control is simply force without direction. Dangerous to everyone, including yourself. So we practice control. They practiced every evening from that point forward. Breathing exercises, mental focusing techniques, sustained concentration. By age 6, Harry could bring himself back from the edge of anger or fear within minutes, a remarkable achievement for a child his age, and one that Minerva acknowledged with the restrained but genuine pride that served as high praise coming from her. She also began teaching him wand movements, though he had no wand to practice with. Swish and flick, she demonstrated, performing the levitation charm with her wand. The movement is as integral as the incantation. When you have a wand of your own, the muscle memory will already be there, waiting. Harry practiced with a stick, reproducing Minerva's movements with concentration and increasing accuracy. Swish and flick, circular motion for transfiguration, a sharp, precise jab for defensive spells. Why am I learning this if I can't actually do magic yet? Because preparation is everything, Minerva said. When you arrive at Hogwarts at 11, you will already understand the theory and the movements that most first years spend their first term simply trying to learn. That gives you a foundation, and Harry, it also means that when you do perform magic for the first time with a proper wand, you'll be channeling it rather than simply releasing it. The difference matters considerably. Will I need the advantage? Minerva considered her answer with care. He was 6, old enough for some version of the truth, too young for all of it. You're famous, she said at last. People will expect things from you because of what happened when you were a baby. Some will expect brilliance without effort because they've built a myth around you. Others will expect failure because they resent the myth. By being genuinely skilled, by working hard and learning properly, you make both groups irrelevant. You become Harry Potter the person, rather than Harry Potter the symbol. Harry absorbed this with the serious, focused attention he brought to things that mattered to him. I want to be good at magic. Then you will be. I'll make absolutely certain of it. By age 7, Harry's education had advanced to a point that would have startled most people who hadn't watched it being built piece by careful piece. He could recite the founding values of all 4 Hogwarts houses. He could identify most common magical plants by sight and describe their properties. He could explain the theoretical underpinning of numerous spells with clarity and precision, and perform the wand movements for all of them with an accuracy that would have impressed many first-year students. He read fluently, wrote in a neat and confident hand, performed mental arithmetic at a level suited to children 3 years his senior, and had begun studying basic Latin for spell etymology. You're turning him into a tiny academic, Flitwick observed during one of Harry's afternoon visits to the charms classroom. The small professor watched Harry working through a logic puzzle with the focused pleasure of someone genuinely enjoying the process. I'm ensuring he has a proper foundation, Minerva replied. He's 7, Minerva. He should be playing, making friends his own age. The comment landed with more accuracy than Minerva would have liked to acknowledge. He plays for precisely 1 hour in the morning and again in the evenings. Yes, I know. Scheduled playtime. Flitwick's voice was gentle rather than critical. But Minerva, Harry doesn't have any friends his own age. He spends all his time with adults. Don't you think he might be lonely? Minerva felt a quiet pang of guilt, which she recognized and addressed rather than suppressed. I've considered it, but taking him to play with other children means exposing him to questions about his fame, about his scar, about his parents. It's simpler isn't always better. She thought about it for the rest of the day. That weekend, she took Harry to Hogsmeade specifically to interact with children his own age. The village had a small park where local families often gathered on fine afternoons. Minerva sat on a bench and watched Harry approach a group of children playing with a quaffle. "Can I play?" he asked, with Minerva's careful politeness. The children turned. One girl pointed immediately at his scar. "You're Harry Potter, the famous one." "I'm just Harry," he said. "Can I play?" "If you're really Harry Potter, do some magic." "I'm not allowed to do magic outside the house," Harry explained without defensiveness. "And I'm too young for a wand anyway. But I know how to throw a quaffle. Madam Hooch taught me." The children exchanged glances. Then, apparently deciding that knowing actual Quidditch skills was considerably more interesting than being famous, they let him join. Minerva watched Harry play. She watched him laugh when he caught the quaffle. She watched him crouch to help a smaller child reach high enough to make a throw. She watched him be 7 years old and nothing else, and felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't entirely realized was tight. When they returned to the cottage that evening, Harry was exhausted and content in the particular way of children who have spent themselves completely on something they've loved. "Can we go back next weekend? I think that would be very good." She had been so focused on preparing Harry for what was coming that she had very nearly forgotten he deserved a childhood to live through first. Flitwick, as it turned out, had been entirely right. That night, as she tucked Harry into bed, she asked, carefully, because the answer mattered, "Are you happy, Harry? Living here with me?" Harry looked at her with Lily's eyes, considering the question with genuine thoughtfulness. "Yes, you're strict, and you make me study a lot, and you don't hug me very much. But you're always there when I need you. You read to me every night. You teach me things. You're my mum." It was the first time he had called her that. Minerva felt something crack quietly open in her chest. "I'm not very good at being a mother," she said, more honestly than she'd intended. "I'm considerably better at being a professor." "You're good at both," Harry said with the serene confidence of someone stating an obvious fact. "Just very organized about it. Despite herself, despite everything." Minerva smiled. "That's accurate. Now sleep. Tomorrow we're reviewing transfiguration theory. Can we also go to the park if I finish my lessons properly?" "Yes." "Deal," Harry said, and closed his eyes. Minerva stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her son, because that was what he was, regardless of blood, regardless of circumstance, and whispered to the quiet room, "I think we're doing all right." From the bed, Harry smiled in his sleep. The growing years, ages 8 through 10. Harry's 8th birthday brought an unexpected complication in the form of an owl, far too expensive for ordinary post, bearing a letter addressed in elegant script to Harry Potter, C.O. Professor M. McGonagall, Hogsmeade. Minerva opened it carefully, checking for curses, a habit from the war and one she saw no reason to abandon. "Dear Harry," the letter began, "you don't know me, but I was your father's closest friend. My name is Sirius Black, and I am your godfather. I've only recently learned that you're being raised by Professor McGonagall rather than your aunt and uncle, and I wanted to write sooner, but I've been dealing with certain complications. I would very much like to meet you, if Professor McGonagall will permit it. I have stories about your father I think you'd enjoy hearing, and some things that belong to James that I'd like to give you when you're ready. I understand if you'd rather not meet a stranger, but know that I'm here if you ever want to know more about your parents. Your godfather, Sirius Black." Minerva read it 3 times, with emotions she declined to name precisely. Sirius Black was, by all credible accounts, a good man, cleared of any Death Eater suspicion, a decorated Auror. He had been James Potter's closest friend, one of the Marauders. He also represented a reminder that Minerva wasn't Harry's only connection to family, and that there were people with arguably more traditional claims on him than a transfiguration professor who had simply refused to walk away from a doorstep. When Dumbledore arrived for his weekly visit, she showed him the letter. "Sirius mentioned to me that he intended to reach out," Dumbledore said, reading over her shoulder. "He's been rather distressed that he wasn't consulted when Harry's guardianship was arranged." "He was in Auror training," Minerva said, hearing the slight defensiveness in her own voice. "Unreachable for weeks at a time. I couldn't exactly wait for his convenience." No one is suggesting you did anything wrong, Minerva. But Sirius is Harry's godfather. James and Lily chose him specifically for exactly this role. He has a right to be part of Harry's life, if you're willing. If I'm willing, Minerva repeated. You're saying I could refuse. You're Harry's legal guardian. You have final authority over who has access to him. But consider what Harry needs. He should know about his parents from people who actually loved them. Sirius can offer him something in that regard that you cannot. It still felt uncomfortably like acknowledging a limitation. That evening, she showed Harry the letter, reading it aloud. His first question was, "A godfather? What's that?" When you were born, your parents chose someone to look after you if anything happened to them. They chose Sirius Black. But circumstances meant you came to me instead. A small pause. Do you want me to go live with him? Absolutely not, Minerva said, with a firmness that surprised even her. You are my son, Harry. That does not change. But Sirius was your father's closest friend. He can tell you things about James and Lily that I don't know. Things you deserve to hear. She met his eyes. Would you like to meet him? Will you be there? If you want me there, yes. Then yes, Harry decided. I want to meet him. Sirius Black arrived at the cottage via Floo on a Saturday morning, and Minerva's first assessment was that he looked exactly like Trouble. Handsome, with dark hair worn slightly too long and grey eyes that held mischief in their natural state, barely 21 years old, and carrying more grief than someone that age should reasonably bear. He greeted Minerva with careful, somewhat formal politeness, his eyes moving immediately to Harry. Harry had been sitting in his usual chair, watching the newcomer with the quiet, evaluating attention that was entirely Minerva's influence. He stood and offered his hand, as she had taught him. Hello, sir. Sirius stared at him with an expression of such raw, complicated longing that Minerva moved slightly forward before stopping herself. Then Sirius shook himself and took Harry's hand gently. Hello, Harry. You can call me Sirius. He exhaled. Merlin, you look exactly like James. Exactly, except the eyes. Those are Lily's. Everyone says that, Harry said. Did you really know my dad? From the age of 11. We did everything together. Something eased in Sirius's expression, remembering. Pranks, Quidditch, getting each other into spectacular trouble. James was brilliant and reckless and occasionally quite arrogant, but utterly loyal when it mattered, which was always when it mattered. They sat for an hour. Sirius told Harry about James, his first Quidditch match, his particular gift for transfiguration, his unfailing loyalty to those he loved, the terrible jokes he'd insisted on telling regardless of audience. Minerva redirected gently when the stories began veering toward pranks that had, historically, endangered other students, but otherwise let them talk. Your father could transform into a stag, Sirius said at one point, an animagus. It took us years to manage, but we did it. Harry's eyes went wide. Really? What could you turn into? A dog. A great black dog. Sirius grinned. Your mum said it was fitting, that I had the loyalty of a dog, and roughly the same level of intellectual subtlety. Harry laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh that Minerva stored carefully away, and Sirius looked like someone who had been given back something he'd believed, lost permanently. After the visit, Harry was quiet for a while. Then, he really loved my dad, didn't he? Yes, Minerva said. Very much. They were like brothers. Do you think my dad would be happy that I'm with you instead of Sirius? Minerva chose her words with care. I think your father would be happy that you're safe and loved and being raised to value both excellence and integrity. Whether that happened to be with me or Sirius or anyone else would matter far less to him than whether you were well cared for. Harry considered this. I like Sirius, but I'm glad I'm with you. A pause. He seems fun, but not very organized. An astute observation, Minerva said, keeping her expression entirely neutral. Sirius became a regular fixture after that, monthly visits lengthening to fortnightly, then weekly. He brought gifts that required Minerva's quiet regulation. Too many sweets, too many products from Zonko's that she was not comfortable having in her cottage. told stories, taught Harry to play exploding Snap with gleeful disregard for fire safety, and gradually became Uncle Sirius in truth as well as in title. He also served as a counterbalance to Minerva's approach that she hadn't known Harry needed and eventually came to appreciate. Where she emphasized discipline and structure, Sirius encouraged spontaneity. Where she focused on academic preparation, Sirius simply played. Where she expressed care through provision and consistency, Sirius was openly, unreservedly affectionate. "You're good for him," Minerva admitted to Sirius during one visit, while Harry was occupied with an elaborate puzzle. I know I'm not." She stopped. "James respected you enormously, you know," Sirius said quietly. "Said you were the only professor who could actually keep him in line," which he found both infuriating and secretly impressive. "And Lily adored you. She told me you encouraged her when other professors were dismissive of Muggle-born students. Lily required no encouragement from me. She was exceptional on her own merits. She valued it anyway." Sirius looked at Harry, working steadily at his puzzle. "He's lucky, you know. Growing up with someone who genuinely wants him, who teaches him properly, who's actually there. I visited the Dursleys once, after James and Lily died, before I knew you'd taken Harry. Petunia slammed the door in my face, said she wanted nothing to do with that world or that boy." His voice hardened slightly. "You saved him from that, so thank you." At age 9, Harry's magic declared itself in a way that gave Minerva pause. She had been explaining the transfiguration process for converting a match into a needle, walking him through the theory as she had done dozens of times before. Harry had picked up one of the matches, and without a wand, without an incantation, without anything except the quiet focus she had spent years cultivating in him, the match became a perfect silver needle. Minerva stared at it. "Did you just—" "I transfigured it?" Harry looked at his own hand with genuine astonishment. "But I don't have a wand." "Some witches and wizards can perform wandless magic," Minerva said carefully. "It's rare. It requires immense inherent power and an unusual degree of natural focus." She paused. "You apparently have both." They experimented over the following weeks. Harry could perform simple transfiguration without a wand. Matches to needles, water to ice, colors shifting in fabric. Nothing complex, and it exhausted him quickly. But the ability was there, consistent and real. "Don't tell anyone," Minerva said, and she said it with genuine seriousness. "Not Sirius, not any of the other staff. This kind of ability will make people nervous." "Why?" "Because powerful wizards who perform wandless magic are rare, and people are made uncomfortable by what they don't understand. They'll want either to exploit your ability or to suppress it. Neither serves you. Better to keep it private until you're older and capable of managing the attention yourself." Harry understood. He had been navigating his fame long enough to know that being exceptional wasn't always safe. 1 year before Hogwarts, Minerva sat Harry down for the conversation she had been composing mentally for years. "Next year, you'll attend Hogwarts as a student. This means several things will change. First, and most importantly, in public, I am Professor McGonagall. Not Mum, not Minerva, Professor McGonagall." Harry's face flickered with something that might have been hurt. "Even in private, in my office, when we are genuinely alone, you may call me whatever you're comfortable with. But in class, in the Great Hall, anywhere other students might overhear, it must be Professor. Do you understand why? Because you can't show favoritism." "Exactly. I'm your mother, but I'm also the deputy headmistress and your transfiguration professor. I'll hold you to precisely the same standards as every other student. I may in fact be harder on you to avoid any accusation of bias. That seems unfair. It is necessary. Second, you'll be sorted into a house. I was Gryffindor. Your parents were both Gryffindor. But the sorting hat chooses based on character and values, not family. You might be Gryffindor, given your academic focus. You might equally be Ravenclaw. Whichever house you're sorted into, I will be proud of you." "What if I'm Slytherin?" "Then you'll be in Slytherin," Minerva said calmly. "The house doesn't define your character, Harry. Your choices define your character. Some of the bravest people I've known were Slytherins, Professor Snape among them. though he would hex me for saying so. Professor Snape is brave. Professor Snape is one of the most genuinely courageous people I know. He simply expresses it in ways that are not immediately recognizable as courage. Harry absorbed this. What else changes? You'll make friends your own age. You'll be surrounded by students who don't already know you the way the Hogwarts staff does. Some will want to befriend you because of your name. Others will dislike you for the same reason. You'll need to learn to tell the difference. How? Watch how they treat other people, not just you. Notice whether they respect the limits you set. Ask yourself whether they're interested in you as a person or in the idea of knowing Harry Potter. Minerva paused. Ron Weasley will be in your year. Arthur Weasley's youngest son. I know the family. They're good people. Ron will likely be a genuine friend if you give him the chance. Anyone I should be careful of? Draco Malfoy. His father had certain associations during the war that I won't detail yet. Draco has been raised with particular beliefs about blood purity. He may try to befriend you. The famous Harry Potter would be quite an asset for that family. Be polite. Be cautious. You're telling me not to trust people. I'm telling you to trust carefully, Minerva corrected. That's a meaningful distinction. You've been sheltered here, protected. Hogwarts will expose you to the full range of what people are. I've prepared you as well as I can. The rest, you'll navigate yourself. Will you help if I need it? Always. But I'll expect you to try first. Coming to me should be when you've genuinely exhausted other options, not your first instinct. She held his gaze. You're growing up, Harry. Part of that means learning to handle difficulty independently. Harry nodded slowly. I'm scared. Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. Just don't let it stop you. You're brilliant and disciplined and kind when it matters. You'll do well. The trip to Diagon Alley for school supplies was, as Minerva had privately anticipated, eventful. The moment they entered, people recognized Harry. Whispers followed them through every shop. Witches and wizards stopped, stared, reached out with requests for autographs or to see the scar. Harry declined each approach with the patient, measured courtesy Minerva had taught him. I appreciate your interest, but I'd prefer some privacy, please. Most people respected it. A few required Minerva to intervene directly, which she did with an expression that left no ambiguity about the outcome. In Flourish and Blots, they encountered a girl roughly Harry's age clutching a stack of books that included several well beyond the Hogwarts first-year list. She recognized Harry immediately, introduced herself as Hermione Granger, declared herself Muggle-born and thoroughly prepared, and demonstrated within approximately 30 seconds that she had read Hogwarts, a history cover to cover, and retained everything. You've read it too, she said to Harry when he correctly completed her reference to the school's founding. My guardian made me read it 3 times, Harry said. Hermione looked at Minerva with the focused attention of someone connecting information rapidly. You're Professor McGonagall. The book says you're one of the most accomplished witches in Britain. The book is generous, Minerva said dryly. The children talked for several minutes, Harry noticing Hermione's intensity and filing it alongside what seemed to be genuine knowledge and enthusiasm rather than mere performance. When they parted, Harry watched Hermione leave with a thoughtful expression. Potential friend? Minerva asked. Maybe. She's very intense. But she actually knows things. That's impressive. Miss Granger will very likely be academically exceptional, Minerva said. Probably the top of your year. Unless you claim that position. Harry's eyes sharpened slightly. Is that a challenge? And you said I'm allowed to have friends who are smarter than me. Intelligence in others is an asset, not a threat. Yes, I'm pleased you remember. At Ollivander's, the wand fitting took considerably longer than usual. Wand after wand failed to choose Harry. Wrong wood, wrong core, wrong flexibility. Until Ollivander retrieved a box from the very back of the shop with the particular expression of someone approaching something they'd been expecting. Holly and Phoenix Feather. 11 inches. Supple. Try this. The moment Harry's fingers closed around it, warmth moved through his hand. Red and gold sparks scattered from the tip. The wand felt settled in a way none of the others had, as though it had been waiting. Curious, Ollivander murmured. Very curious indeed. What is? Minerva asked sharply. The phoenix whose tail feather sits in that wand gave only one other feather, just one. That wand's brother chose a very different wizard. He looked at Harry over the tops of his measuring tape. 13.5 inches. You. The wand that gave you that scar, Mr. Potter. Harry's hand tightened on the wand. My wand is related to Voldemort's. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. It is not always clear why, but I think we must expect great things from you. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. Harry will do great things that are good, Minerva said, with a finality that closed the subject entirely. Come along, Harry. We have what we need. Outside, Harry was quiet. Minerva waited. It bothers you, she said. The connection. Wouldn't it bother you? My wand is linked to the wand of the wizard who murdered my parents. Your wand is connected, yes. You are not. She said it simply, without softening it into sentiment. The wand chose you for your own qualities. What you do with it is entirely your own. Remember what I've taught you. It's our choices that define us, not our connections, not our circumstances. Your choices, Harry. Those are yours entirely. 1 week before term, Minerva gave him a leather-bound journal, his initials embossed on the cover. For thoughts, she said. Observations, experiences. At Hogwarts, you'll encounter things I can't help you with directly. At least not in the way I usually would. Writing them down will help you work through them. She paused. And Harry, if you ever need to tell me something but find you can't say it aloud, write it here. I'll read it and respond. A private conversation between us, even when we have to maintain professional distance in public. Harry held the journal with both hands. Thank you. You're welcome. Now, let's review the Transfiguration curriculum one more time. I expect top marks, and that requires preparation, Harry said, smiling. Save the eye-rolling for school. For now, you're still permitted to call me Mum. She sat in her study with the photograph on her desk. Harry at 7, grinning with a missing front tooth, holding up a perfectly transfigured needle. She had raised him for 10 years. Tomorrow he would leave for Hogwarts, and he would still be hers. But he would also be navigating a world she couldn't entirely control, facing situations she couldn't predict, becoming someone she had shaped but would not be able to shape much longer. Ready or not, she thought, here we go. # Hogwarts years 1 through 3. Platform 9 3/4 was its familiar, magnificent chaos. Families pressed together in the steam. Owls hooted in protest. Cats exercised their opinions loudly. And the Hogwarts Express stood gleaming red at the platform's end, as though it had been waiting all summer to make this particular impression. Minerva stood with Harry, both of them having taken the flue to King's Cross before walking to the platform. Harry's trunk had been loaded. Hedwig, the snowy owl he'd named with the quiet certainty of someone who knew immediately, sat in her cage looking supremely unimpressed by the surrounding commotion. Remember, Minerva said, keeping her voice low and steady, in public, I'm Professor McGonagall. Sit with other first years on the train. Make friends. Don't mention our relationship unless you're directly asked, and even then, Professor McGonagall is my guardian is entirely sufficient. I remember. And Harry, she waited until he looked at her. You are going to be brilliant. I have no doubts whatsoever about that. But please, try to enjoy yourself. Hogwarts isn't only about academic achievement. It's about growing up, making mistakes, learning who you are. Don't spend every moment trying to be perfect. You spent 10 years teaching me to be perfect. I spent 10 years teaching you to be excellent. There is a difference. Excellence is sustainable. Perfection is exhausting. She hesitated, then did what she almost never did in public, and pulled him into a brief, fierce embrace. I am proud of you. Whatever house you're sorted into, whatever marks you achieve, whatever choices you make, I am proud of you. Harry held on for a moment. Thank you for everything, for taking me from the Dursleys, for raising me, for being my mum. Go on then, she said, before I become maudlin and embarrass us both in front of witnesses. Harry grinned, picked up Hedwig's cage and boarded the train. Minerva watched him go and felt the particular terror that she had come to understand was simply what love looked like when it had to let go. "He'll be fine," a warm voice said beside her. Molly Weasley, red-eyed from her own goodbye, was smiling at her across the crowd. "You've raised that boy beautifully, Minerva. Everyone knows it. You've given him something remarkable." "I hope so," Minerva said quietly. "I know so." On the train, Harry found himself sharing a compartment with Ron Weasley, who introduced himself with the immediate, guileless warmth of someone who hadn't yet learned to be cautious about it. "I'm Ron Weasley. Blimey, you're Harry Potter. Sorry, I know you probably get that all the—" "Just Harry is fine," Harry said. "And yes, you're Arthur Weasley's son. Professor McGonagall mentioned your family, said your dad was good people." "Your guardian's Professor McGonagall?" Ron's eyes widened. "Bloody hell. My brothers say she's brilliant but terrifying. What's it actually like, living with her?" Harry considered. "Structured. She's very organized, very serious about schedules and proper study habits, but she cares. She just expresses it differently than most people do. My mum expresses it by hugging you every 5 minutes and worrying constantly," Ron said. "Drives us mental. But yeah, same basic principle, I suppose." They bonded over Quidditch, chocolate frogs, and their mutual carefully concealed nerves about the sorting. When Hermione arrived, looking for Neville Longbottom's toad, she recognized Harry from Diagon Alley and immediately asked whether he'd been practicing transfiguration from the textbook. "Professor McGonagall won't let me practice unsupervised," Harry said. "She's very clear that theory and actual magic are different things and that attempting spells without instruction is dangerous." "She's your guardian," Hermione said, with the expression of someone who had just connected several things at once. "That must be extraordinary, living with a Hogwarts professor. You must know so much already." "Some," Harry admitted carefully. Minerva had been equally clear about not boasting. "Excellence speaks for itself. You don't need to announce it, simply demonstrate it when the moment requires." At the castle, Professor Flitwick placed the sorting hat on Harry's head, and the great hall fell into the particular silence reserved for the moments that matter. "Well, well," said a voice in his mind. "Harry Potter, Minerva McGonagall's son, not by blood, but by choice. Which is the more powerful bond, I wonder? Let me see what we have." The hat moved through his thoughts with the thorough efficiency of something that had been doing this for 1,000 years. "Courage, yes. Your guardian's influence is clear, and Lily Evans is before her. Loyalty that runs very deep. A sharp mind. A genuine thirst for knowledge that Ravenclaw would nurture beautifully. And cunning. Oh yes. You think strategically, plan ahead, consider consequences before acting. Slytherin could make you exceptional." "Where do I belong?" Harry thought carefully. That is precisely the right question. You could excel anywhere. The question is where you'll grow most. You've spent your whole life surrounded by Gryffindors, your guardian, your godfather, most of the adults who shaped you. You know that house thoroughly. It would be comfortable, Harry thought. I need to be challenged. Ah, now that is Ravenclaw thinking. You want knowledge for its own sake, wisdom, not just skill. The chance to develop your mind without the weight of expectation that comes with being the chosen one in Gryffindor's colors. Better be Ravenclaw. The blue and bronze table erupted. Harry removed the hat, caught Minerva's eye at the staff table, and saw, briefly completely, the unguarded pride on her face before her professional expression reasserted itself. He walked to his new table, feeling something settle quietly into place. First-year transfiguration introduced a dynamic that Harry had known was coming and still found faintly strange in practice. Minerva was, as promised, precise and demanding and rigorously fair. When Harry transfigured his match into a perfect needle on the first attempt, and he did, because he had been practicing the theory and movement for years, she examined it and awarded 10 points to Ravenclaw with the same brisk neutrality she would have shown any student. "Though I expect nothing less," she added, "given your extensive theoretical preparation." Several students looked at Harry with varying degrees of envy and surprise. Ron found him at lunch. "Mate, that was brilliant." She barely praised anyone else, but you got it perfect first try. Isn't that a bit, I don't know, unfair? You've had years of preparation she gave you." Harry bristled slightly, then made himself consider it honestly. "I've worked hard for those years." "It wasn't handed to me," she demanded effort every single day. "It's not about fairness, it's about preparation. You could do the same if you studied the theory properly before attempting the practical." Easy for you to say, you live with the professor. "I live with someone who expects excellence constantly," Harry said. "That's not the same as having an easy ride. She'd give me a troll if I deserved one. She might actually be harder on me than other students to make sure no one can accuse her of playing favorites." Ron seemed to think about this. Fair enough, I suppose. The Halloween troll incident demonstrated clearly and practically how differently Harry approached problems from how most 11-year-olds would. When Professor Quirrell burst into the Great Hall screaming about a troll in the dungeons, Harry's first response wasn't to rush toward danger, it was to think. "The Slytherin dormitories are in the dungeons," he said urgently to the nearest prefect. "If there's a troll down there, those students are in immediate danger. Someone needs to get them upward, away from it." The prefect stared at him for half a second, then ran directly to Minerva with Harry's observation. Minerva's eyes went sharp with recognition. "You're absolutely right. All prefects, organized evacuation of the lower levels immediately. All students moved to upper floors." The troll was subdued by professors before it reached any students. Dumbledore publicly thanked Harry for his tactical thinking, awarding Ravenclaw 20 points. "You assessed the situation and alerted the appropriate people," Minerva told him that evening during their weekly check-in. "Rather than attempting to handle it yourself. That's exactly the approach I've been trying to build in you." "It seemed obvious," Harry said. "Why would I run toward a troll when I could tell people actually capable of managing it? Many students would have panicked or tried to be heroic. You did neither. I'm very proud of you." As the term continued, Harry noticed something increasingly difficult to dismiss. Professor Quirrell seemed specifically, distinctly nervous around him. Not the general anxious jumpiness that characterized the man's dealings with everyone. Something more directed. Quirrell flinched when Harry walked too close, avoided eye contact with an effort that was itself conspicuous. "He's afraid of me specifically," Harry told Hermione. "Not just generally nervous. When I come near him, something changes." "You're Harry Potter," Hermione said. "Maybe he's starstruck." "Or maybe he's hiding something," Harry said. "And being near me makes it harder." They investigated carefully, using Hermione's research skills and Harry's knowledge of Hogwarts' quieter corners, accumulated over years of exploring with Minerva's quiet permission. They discovered that something was being guarded on the 3rd floor, a 3-headed dog, significant defensive enchantments, something worth protecting extensively. "We should tell Professor McGonagall," Harry said immediately. "What if we're wrong?" Hermione asked. "What if it's nothing suspicious, and we look foolish? If we're wrong, we look foolish. If we're right, and someone steals whatever's being protected, we've done nothing." Harry shook his head. "The cost of being wrong is embarrassment. The cost of saying nothing when we're right is much higher. We tell her." Minerva listened to their account with growing gravity, then told them, "You believe Professor Quirrell is attempting to steal the Philosopher's Stone." "The what?" Harry asked. "Never mind. Thank you for bringing this to me. I will investigate. Both of you are to stay completely away from the 3rd floor. If there is a genuine threat, it is not for first years to handle." Minerva took the information to Dumbledore. Dumbledore investigated and discovered not only that Quirrell was indeed attempting to steal the stone, but that Quirrell was functioning as a host for a fragment of Voldemort's surviving soul. The situation was resolved by the staff before it could escalate. Quirrell was captured, the Horcrux fragment contained, and the stone relocated. Harry and Hermione received 50 points each for identifying a genuine threat and properly reporting it. "You did exactly right," Minerva told Harry. "You noticed something wrong, investigated carefully, and brought it to the appropriate people rather than attempting to manage it yourself. That is mature thinking. That is exactly what I have been working to build in you." What was Quirrell trying to steal? The Philosopher's Stone, an alchemical object that produces the elixir of life. Voldemort wanted it to restore himself to a body. Harry felt coldness move through him. He's still out there. His body was destroyed. His spirit, such as it is, endures, diminished, but not gone. Minerva paused, clearly measuring her words. Someday, Harry, he may return. When he does, you'll need to be ready. But that is someday. For now, you are 11 years old. Learn, grow, make friends. Leave Voldemort to the adults who can currently address him. Second year brought the opening of the Chamber of Secrets. Students began being petrified. The school tightened with a specific, cold kind of fear. Harry brought his observations to Minerva the moment he had something concrete. The attacks seemed to be targeting Muggle-born students specifically, he said. Hermione's terrified she'll be next. And I heard a voice in the walls, a hissing voice, speaking about killing. I was the only one who could hear it. Minerva's expression grew grave. What kind of voice? Like a snake. I understood it. I could follow what it was saying. That's Parseltongue, she said carefully. The ability to speak to serpents. It's extraordinarily rare and historically associated with Salazar Slytherin. But I'm not related to Slytherin. No, but Voldemort is. She was quiet for a moment. When he tried to kill you as a baby and his curse rebounded, it may have transferred some of his abilities. We'll need to research this carefully. When Hermione was petrified, Harry was devastated. But he didn't act alone. He worked with Minerva and Dumbledore, contributing his Parseltongue ability and his observations, while the adults led the investigation. They traced the possession to Ginny Weasley and Tom Riddle's diary, and when Ginny was taken into the chamber, Harry stood before Minerva and Dumbledore and made his case with calm precision. She's Ron's sister and my friend. The entrance requires Parseltongue to open. I'm the only one here who can do that. Let me help. Minerva wanted to refuse. The look on her face made that clear. But Dumbledore pointed out that without Harry's particular ability, they couldn't access the chamber at all. I'm going with him, Minerva said in a tone that foreclosed any discussion. They descended together. Harry spoke the chamber open in Parseltongue, hearing Minerva's sharp exhale at the sound of it. They found Ginny dying on the floor, Tom Riddle's memory becoming corporeal, and the basilisk rising from the statue of Slytherin. Don't look directly at it, Minerva commanded, conjuring mirrors instantly. Indirect sight only. The battle was genuinely terrifying. Minerva jeweled Riddle's memory, a formidable echo of Voldemort's 16-year-old self, while Harry faced the basilisk itself. Fawkes arrived with the sorting hat, which yielded Gryffindor's sword. Harry drove it through the basilisk's mouth into its brain, was poisoned by a fang, and Fawkes healed him with phoenix tears before the venom could kill him. He stabbed the diary with the basilisk fang, and Tom Riddle's memory dissolved. Afterward, in the hospital wing, Minerva sat beside him with her hands very still in her lap. You fought a 60-foot basilisk, she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. I'm fine. You were poisoned, and then healed. And Ginny's alive. We saved her. Harry looked at her. But Minerva, I need you to hear something. This is my life. The prophecy means I'm the one who has to face these things. I need to learn how, while there's still time. You can't protect me from that. Minerva pulled him into a tight hug that she rarely permitted herself, holding on harder than she usually allowed. I know, she said into his hair. I know. But Harry, you're 12. You shouldn't have to fight dark wizards and ancient monsters. You should be playing Quidditch and worrying about examinations. I'm doing all those things, Harry said quietly. And I'm also preparing for what's coming, because we both know it's coming. Third year brought Remus Lupin as defense against the dark arts professor, which delighted Harry. Uncle Remus is teaching, he wrote to Minerva in one of their regular exchanges. They had maintained the correspondence habit even while living in the same castle, finding it preserved the useful separation between mother and son and professor and student. He's brilliant at the practical work. We've been doing Boggarts. Lupin taught Harry the Patronus charm privately, after the Dementors affected him particularly severely during a Quidditch match. The creatures forced him to relive his parents' deaths in a way that affected him more intensely than most students. Raw emotion, not conscious memory, but overwhelming regardless. Focus on your happiest memory, Lupin said. The most joyful thing you can summon. Let it fill every part of your mind. Harry thought of Minerva at his first Quidditch game, her control breaking entirely to shout at a bad call. He thought of Sirius arriving at the cottage with terrible jokes and too many sweets. He thought of the park in Hogsmeade, and a girl named Lily teaching him to skip stones and being 7 years old with nothing to prove. Expecto Patronum. A stag erupted from his wand, his father's animagus form, silver bright and magnificent, cantering across the room with its head raised. When Harry showed Minerva, she had tears in her eyes, which she did not attempt to conceal. James would be so proud, she said softly. A corporeal Patronus at 13. That's extraordinary, Harry. Third year ended peacefully. Fourth year was coming, and both of them could feel it. A shift in the air, a gathering of something larger and more dangerous than anything that had come before. "You're ready," Minerva told him one summer evening, after a particularly demanding advanced transfiguration session. "You're more technically prepared than most fifth years, Harry. When he returns," Harry said quietly, "not if," and they both heard the difference. "Will I be able to fight him?" "I can give you the skills and the knowledge and the preparation," Minerva said honestly. "The rest, the choices, the battles, the final confrontation, those are yours. I can't take them from you. I'm not certain I would, even if I could." "I know." Harry looked at her across the room. "Thank you, Minerva, for all of it, for taking me in, for training me, for being the parent I needed, even when you didn't quite know how." "I'm still learning," she said. "Every day I'm still learning how to do this. But Harry, you make it easy. You're everything I could have hoped for." A pause. "Your parents would be so proud. I know I am." The announcement of the Triwizard Tournament arrived during the start-of-term feast with all of Dumbledore's characteristic theatrical timing. Eternal glory awaited the champion who won. Only students 17 and older could enter. Harry, sitting at the Ravenclaw table with his chin resting on one hand, felt a straightforward combination of relief and mild curiosity. Relief at being ineligible, curiosity about what the tasks would actually involve. Beside him, Terry Boot was practically vibrating. "This is absolutely brilliant. Representatives from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. International cooperation. Harry, your guardian must be deeply involved in planning all of this. She's deputy headmistress." "I'm sure she's been part of the organization," Harry said, "though she hasn't mentioned it to me specifically. We try to keep school business and our personal arrangement fairly separate. Still, living with a professor during the Triwizard Tournament, you'll know things before anyone else." "I won't," Harry said, with the patient firmness of someone who had answered this assumption before. "That would be inappropriate, and she'd never tell me anyway. She's extremely serious about fairness." When the Beauxbatons carriage and the Durmstrang ship arrived, Harry watched with genuine interest. The international students were older, more confident, carrying themselves with the assurance of people who had been trained seriously. The Beauxbatons delegation included Fleur Delacour, whose particular quality of beauty had most of the Great Hall apparently losing cognitive function. "Part Vila," Hermione murmured knowledgeably. "That's why everyone is staring. The allure affects most people." "Does it affect you?" Harry asked. "Somewhat, but I find intelligence more compelling than appearance, and we shouldn't assume the two are mutually exclusive." The Durmstrang students arrived with Victor Crumb, whose reputation as an international Quidditch seeker preceded him enormously. Ron was starstruck. Harry was more interested in watching how the international contingent carried themselves. There was a particular quality to their certainty, a different kind of confidence than Hogwarts produced, not worse but distinctly other. When the Goblet of Fire was revealed and the age line drawn, Harry stayed well clear of it. He had absolutely no desire for additional glory or fame. What he had was already more than sufficient and frequently inconvenient. What he did notice, watching the proceedings over several days, was that Barty Crouch seemed unusually tense for the administrator of a prestigious international event, and that Igor Karkaroff kept watching Harry with an expression that landed somewhere between recognition and calculation. "Something feels off about this tournament," Harry told Hermione in the library. "I can't identify it precisely." But Crouch is nervous in a way that goes beyond professional pressure. And Karkaroff, he keeps looking at me like I'm relevant to something he's thinking about. You might be being paranoid, Hermione said, which, given your history with dark wizards attempting to kill you at school, is entirely understandable and not necessarily unreasonable. Harry watched with detached interest as the goblet produced 3 names in turn: Victor Crumb for Durmstrang, Fleur Delacour for Beauxbatons, Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts. The Great Hall erupted. Cedric was popular, talented, an entirely worthy champion, and Harry was already reaching for the food being passed along the table when the goblet turned red again. A 4th slip of parchment shot into the air. Dumbledore caught it, read it, and the colour drained from his face in a way Harry had never seen before. Harry Potter. The silence that followed was absolute. Harry Potter, Dumbledore said again, louder. Harry stood on legs that had gone curiously numb and walked to the front of the hall. The whispers followed him like a physical force. He's 14. He cheated. He's trying to steal Cedric's moment. He's always looking for attention. And he walked through all of it with the practiced stillness Minerva had spent years building in him. In the side chamber, surrounded by champions and judges and professors, the argument began immediately. Minerva was on her feet before Harry had fully entered the room, her face pale and her eyes bright with protective fury. "Headmaster, this is impossible. Harry would nevertheless, Professor McGonagall. His name came from the goblet. We must address the situation as it is." "I didn't enter," Harry said, "for what would eventually become the 5th time. I don't want to compete. I'm 14 years old, and I'm not eligible." "Someone entered your name," Dumbledore said quietly. He was watching Harry with those penetrating blue eyes, reading something in his face. "Someone who wanted you in this tournament. The question is why?" "Because they want to harm him," Minerva said, her voice cutting with barely controlled emotion. "This tournament is designed to test 17-year-olds with years of additional training. Forcing a 14-year-old to compete in it is attempted murder dressed up in bureaucratic language. The Goblet of Fire constitutes a binding magical contract," Barty Crouch said, with the stiff inflexibility of a man hiding behind procedural certainty. "Mr. Potter must compete or forfeit his magic. Those are the rules. He didn't enter. Why should he be punished for someone else's manipulation? Those are the rules." Harry listened to them argue and felt something cold and very clear settle in his thinking. Someone had put his name in that goblet. Someone with access, capability, and a specific motive. The only person who would benefit from Harry being placed in mortal danger, the only one whose interests were served by Harry being frightened, distracted, or killed, was Voldemort. "I'll compete," Harry said. The room went quiet and looked at him. "Harry," Minerva began. "I don't have a choice," he said. "Compete or lose my magic, and whoever put my name in did it deliberately, for a specific purpose. They want me vulnerable, distracted, possibly dead before the year ends. The best way to counter that is to compete, survive every task, and work out what they're actually planning." He paused. "Running from it doesn't make it go away. It just makes me less prepared when it reaches me anyway." Mad-Eye Moody, the new defense professor, had been watching Harry from across the room with his magical eye fixed and unblinking. "Remarkably strategic thinking," he growled, "for someone who's just been forced into a death trap. The boy's right. Someone's playing a complicated game. The way to win it is to play better." Minerva looked at Harry with the expression of someone who has recognized the logic of an argument they desperately wish they could refute. Then she closed her eyes briefly. "Then we prepare you," she said. "Properly. Every spare moment, every resource available. If you must compete, you will be as ready as it's possible to be." That night in Minerva's office, she paced with the contained energy of someone who needed to be moving to manage what she was feeling. "Someone is trying to kill you," she said bluntly. "Again, this is the 4th consecutive year that someone has targeted you at Hogwarts. You are 14 years old. You should be concerned about examinations and Quidditch and whether you like anyone, not about surviving assassination attempts dressed up as school competitions." "I know," Harry said. "I would like you to be angrier about this. Would it help anything?" Minerva stopped pacing, looked at him, When did you become so calm about people trying to kill you? Roughly 10 years ago, Harry said, with the slight smile he allowed himself in private with her, when you explained that Voldemort would probably return someday and I'd have to face him. I've had time to adjust to the idea. This is just earlier than expected. You're too young to be this pragmatic about your own mortality. Then perhaps you raised me wrong, Harry said. The smile widened slightly. Or perhaps you raised me exactly right for the life I actually have, rather than the life you wished I had. Minerva was quiet for a long moment. Then, cheeky child, sit down. Tell me everything you know about dragons. The preparation was systematic and demanding. Minerva recruited Flitwick for advanced charm work, Moody for tactical combat theory and situational defense. And, after a conversation that Harry would have paid considerable amounts of galleons to witness, Snape. Potter needs a fire resistance potion, Minerva told Snape during a staff meeting Harry was not present for, though she relayed the essentials afterward, and a strengthened healing draft beyond what the hospital wing typically stocks. I understand you have reservations about the boy personally. I'm asking you to set them aside. Snape had apparently set them aside. He delivered the potions to Minerva's office himself, setting them down with the precise, controlled movements that characterized everything he did. Harry looked up from his studying. This is a fire resistance potion, Snape said curtly. Apply it to all exposed skin before the first task. It won't render you immune to dragon fire, but it will prevent instant incineration. This is a blood-replenishing potion. If you're badly injured, drink it. This is... Why are you helping me? Harry asked. Snape's expression gave nothing away. Because Professor McGonagall asked me to, and because whatever my personal feelings, I have no wish to watch a 14-year-old murdered for entertainment. Snape nodded once and left. He does care, Minerva said quietly, after the door closed. In his way, beneath the hostility and the history he can't quite set down. Severus Snape is a genuinely good man who has been treated badly by life, and takes it out on people who remind him of his pain. But when it actually matters, he's always there. The first task was dragons. Harry drew the Hungarian horntail, the most dangerous specimen available, which he noted with the resigned acceptance of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by this kind of thing. He prepared methodically, applied Snape's potion, rehearsed his strategy, checked his wand. The strategy was straightforward in concept and demanding in execution. Summon his firebolt from the castle, outfly the dragon using his seeker skills, retrieve the golden egg from the nest while the horntail was occupied chasing him through the air. In the judges' stand, Minerva sat with her hands clenched white-knuckled in her lap, maintaining an expression of professional neutrality through what was clearly an exercise of pure will. Harry entered the arena, raised his wand, and called his broom. What followed was 10 minutes of the most demanding flying of his life. The horntail was faster than he'd expected, and the fire came in directions he hadn't anticipated. He flew in tight circles, used his altitude, exploited the dragon's fixed attention to dive for the nest at the exact moment the creature committed to a direction, grabbed the egg, drove upward hard, and cleared the arena to the sound of the crowd producing a wall of noise. The other judges awarded 9s and 10s. Minerva recused herself from scoring. Conflict of interest, she said afterward, with a flat finality that foreclosed commentary. In the first aid tent, treating the minor burns on his arms, she sat beside him and said, "That was the most frightening 10 minutes of my life. Watching you fly circles around an animal that could have killed you instantly at any moment. But it didn't. No, it didn't." She exhaled. "Harry, please promise me you'll approach the remaining tasks with the minimum necessary risk." "I promise to be as careful as the tasks allow," Harry said. "That's the most honest promise I can make. It will have to do." The golden egg emitted a banshee wail when opened. Harry spent weeks working on it before Cedric Diggory offered him a quiet hint. Try the prefect's bathroom. Open it underwater. Harry was suspicious of unsolicited help, but took the advice regardless, confirming it was genuine before acting on it. Underwater, the wailing became a riddle. The lake held something he would miss, and he had an hour to retrieve it. Research produced gillyweed. Neville, whose knowledge of herbology had expanded considerably under Professor Sprout's encouragement, provided it. Harry consumed it before the task, transformed partially, and dove. What he found beneath the water were 4 people suspended in magical sleep. Ron, representing his closest friendship, Hermione, Gabrielle Delacour, Fleur's younger sister, and Cho Chang. But the person the merpeople indicated as his, the thing he would miss most, was Sirius, suspended further along the lake bed with his dark hair drifting in the current. Harry freed Sirius first. Then, noticing that Fleur hadn't appeared and Gabrielle remained, freed her as well. He arrived at the surface later than the other champions, earning extra points for the moral reasoning of the decision and losing points for the time. On shore, Sirius coughed up lake water and grinned at him with the irrepressible cheerfulness of someone who finds near drowning more amusing than alarming. Well, that was thoroughly unpleasant. Apparently, I'm what you'd miss most. I'm genuinely touched, pup. Your family, Harry said simply. Minerva wrapped a warming blanket around his shoulders. Well done. Though rescuing 2 people was a considerable risk. Gabrielle was 8 years old. I wasn't going to leave her there because her sister got delayed. Always the hero, Minerva said, but her tone was fond in a way she didn't bother to conceal. The Yule Ball required Harry to produce a date, which he approached with the same methodical pragmatism he brought to all logistical problems. He asked Cho Chang as a friend. She was already attending with Cedric and declined graciously, and he eventually asked Hermione, who accepted with visible relief given that Ron had completely failed to ask her in time. The night before the ball, Minerva adjusted his dress robes with the efficient precision she brought to everything practical and told him, without any apparent irony, that he looked very handsome and that his father had secretly loved formal occasions, despite loudly claiming otherwise. At the ball itself, Harry danced with Hermione, both of them stiff and technically correct, and quietly relieved when the obligation was discharged, made appropriate conversation with the other champions, and spent a portion of the evening watching Mad-Eye Moody's magical eye track him continuously across the room. Professor Moody watches me constantly, he mentioned to Minerva during one of their preparation sessions afterward. Not the general vigilance he shows toward everyone, specifically me. He's also been unusually helpful with tournament preparation, more invested in my success than a professor who barely knows me would typically be. Moody is paranoid by long habit, Minerva said carefully. Constant vigilance is his entire philosophy. She paused. But Harry, trust your instincts. If something feels genuinely wrong, it usually is worth examining. The third task was a maze filled with obstacles and creatures. Harry prepared with characteristic thoroughness. He drilled stunning spells until they were reflexive, practiced shield charms under pressure, worked through fire spells for plant-based obstacles and creatures, reviewed tactical positioning with the same focus he brought to Quidditch strategy. Remember, Minerva said the night before the task, the cup is not worth your life. If you encounter something you genuinely cannot manage, send up red sparks. The professors will extract you. Surviving matters far more than winning. I'll be careful, Harry promised. He entered the maze at the cannon sound and discovered almost immediately that things were wrong in ways that went beyond difficult obstacles. The paths shifted in patterns that felt deliberate rather than random. He encountered Victor Crumb behaving strangely, attacking another champion, his eyes glassy with the specific blankness of the Imperious Curse. Harry stunned him, sent up red sparks to summon the professors, and moved on. He reached the cup at the same moment as Cedric Diggory, approaching from a different path. Take it, Cedric said. You saved my life with the dragon hint. It's yours. We could share it, Harry said. Joint Hogwarts victory. Cedric looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Together, then. They reached for the cup simultaneously, and the world lurched. They landed hard on cold ground among old graves. Harry recognized it from descriptions he'd encountered. Little Hangleton, the Riddle family graveyard. Trap, he said immediately, scrambling upright, hand already moving toward his wand. Cedric, it's a trap. We need to... A figure emerged from the darkness. Wormtail, carrying something that moved and spoke in a thin, cold voice Harry had heard once before in the back of a defense professor's head. Kill the spare. The green light took Cedric Diggory before he had time to understand what was happening. He was there, and then he was simply gone. And Harry stood in the sudden silence of it, with his wand raised and horror flooding through every part of him. He had no time to process it. Ropes bound him to Tom Riddle's headstone, magically reinforced and impossible to break. What followed was a nightmare conducted in cold moonlight. Wormtail performed the ritual. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant. Wormtail severed his own hand without flinching, the specific brutality of it making Harry look away. Blood of the enemy, taken from Harry's arm with a silver blade. The cauldron turned the color of blood. Something rose from it. Tall, skeletal, red eyes in a flat serpentine face. Voldemort had a body again. Death Eaters appeared from the darkness, apparating at the call of the Dark Mark, kneeling before their resurrected master with the fervor of people whose patience had finally been rewarded. Voldemort surveyed them with cold satisfaction, then turned those red eyes on Harry. "Harry Potter," he said softly, "the boy who lived, come to witness history, and then to die." He released the bonds with a gesture. "Show me what Minerva McGonagall taught you. Show me if her years of preparation were sufficient." They weren't. He was 14, and Voldemort was the most powerful dark wizard in a century, and no amount of preparation could fully bridge that gap. The duel was brutal and one-sided. The Cruciatus curse hit Harry and he screamed before he could stop himself. A slicing hex opened a deep cut along his arm. A blasting curse threw him 10 feet, and he landed hard enough to lose a breath. But Minerva had taught him to think even when he was frightened, especially when he was frightened. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to survive. Those were entirely different objectives requiring entirely different tactics. Expelliarmus, their wands connected. Brother wands, the same phoenix's feather core in each, and the effect was immediate and catastrophic. Golden light erupting between them, the thread holding them locked in a battle of will that Harry had read about but never experienced. Priori incantatem, the echo of every person Voldemort's wand had killed emerging in pale ghostly light. An old man, a woman, Bertha Jorkins, a caretaker Harry didn't know. And then Cedric Diggory's echo, his face clear and calm now, looking at Harry with something that wasn't quite a smile. "Hold on," Cedric's echo said. "Hold on, Harry." And then James Potter, his father's echo, looking at him with a pride and grief so intermingled Harry couldn't separate them. "You've grown. We're so proud. When the connection breaks, run. Get to the cup." Lily, his mother, her eyes the same impossible green as his own. "We'll give you time. We'll hold him. Run, my love." The shades of Voldemort's victims pressed closer to their killer, demanding his attention, giving Harry seconds. Harry broke the connection with everything he had, scooped up Cedric's body in a grip that he refused to release. He would not leave Cedric in that graveyard, he would not, and touched the cup. The portkey activated. He landed at the maze entrance. The crowd cheered, thinking he'd won. Then they saw Cedric, and the cheering stopped. Minerva reached him first. She was kneeling beside him before the crowd had fully processed what they were seeing, her hands on his face, her eyes searching. "Harry, what happened? Where did you... Is that..." "Voldemort," Harry said. His voice came out wrong, flat and hollow. "He's back." The cup was a portkey. Graveyard. Peter Pettigrew performed a ritual. "He used my blood, and... Cedric is dead. He's back, Minerva. He has a body." Dumbledore was there in moments, taking control of the situation with decisive calm. Hospital wing. Alert the order. Lock down the school. In the hospital wing, Madame Pomfrey treating the physical damage, Minerva sat beside Harry's bed and held his hand without saying anything for a long time. There were no right words for this, and she knew it. "Cedric's dead because we grabbed the cup together," Harry said finally, to the ceiling. "He's dead because of me. Voldemort killed Cedric Diggory. Peter Pettigrew killed him. You tried to save him by bringing his body home to his family. Those are the true facts, Harry, however much this grief wants to rewrite them." She tightened her grip on his hand. "You are not responsible for the murders committed by dark wizards." "It doesn't feel that way." "I know," she said. "I know it doesn't. That's grief, and it's right that you feel it. Just don't let it become something false. She stayed there with him, not offering comfort that couldn't be given, simply being present. Sometimes that was all there was. Hash. 5th year, the Umbridge conflict. The summer after 4th year was the hardest Harry had experienced. Nightmares woke him regularly. The graveyard, the green light, Cedric's empty eyes. He processed it quietly and imperfectly, the way people do when something has genuinely broken something in them and they're still deciding what to build in its place. Minerva consulted Dumbledore about professional support. Harry declined. "I'm working through it," he said. "Talking about the feelings won't change what happened. Cedric is still dead. Voldemort is still back. What I can actually do is prepare for what comes next. So that's what we'll do," Minerva said. And they did. She pushed his advanced transfiguration work harder than before. Sirius came more often, teaching Harry dueling technique with the focused seriousness of someone who understood that this was no longer theoretical preparation. Remus Lupin visited to teach him about Death Eater tactics and the lessons of the First War. And Snape, without ceremony or explanation, began teaching Harry occlumency. The lessons were brutal. Snape invaded his mind repeatedly, forcing him to relive Cedric's death, his parents' murder, every traumatic memory that floated near the surface. "Clear your mind," Snape said, again and again, with the patience of someone who understood the necessity even if not the kindness. "Emotion is weakness when it becomes a door. The Dark Lord will use every memory, every fear. You must learn to close them." Harry failed repeatedly. Then he failed slightly less. Then slowly and painfully, mental walls began to form, not impenetrable, but real, functional, present. 5th year began under a particular kind of darkness. The Ministry was publicly and aggressively denying Voldemort's return. The Daily Prophet was running systematic campaigns against Dumbledore and Harry, calling them liars and attention-seekers, suggesting Harry was traumatized and delusional, implying Dumbledore was manufacturing a crisis to consolidate power. And then Dolores Umbridge arrived. She appeared at the staff table in the opening feast like something that had been designed to look harmless, small, pink-clad, with a smile that never varied and a voice like poisoned honey. She had been appointed by the Ministry as defense against the Dark Arts professor, sent explicitly to suppress any discussion of Voldemort's return and control Hogwarts from within. Her first class removed all ambiguity about her intentions. "You will be learning defensive theory only," she announced, with the sweet certainty of someone who expects no resistance. "Wands away. There will be no practical magic in this classroom. You are perfectly safe. The Ministry has confirmed this." Hermione's hand went up. "But Professor, how can we learn to defend ourselves without actually practicing?" "Who precisely do you imagine you would need to defend yourselves against, Miss Granger? You are children in a school. You are entirely safe." "Voldemort is back," Harry said flatly, from the middle of the room. "I was there. I saw him. We need to learn practical defense, because the threat is real." The classroom went very quiet. "Mr. Potter," Umbridge said, with a smile that never touched her eyes, "you will not tell lies in my classroom. I'm not lying. Detention. Tonight. My office." The detention was conducted with a blood quill, a dark object, highly illegal, that carved the words, "I must not tell lies," into the back of Harry's hand with his own blood, healing and cutting again, over and over. Undressed became a scar. Umbridge watched with the specific satisfaction of someone who enjoys the work. Harry said nothing, showed nothing. Minerva had taught him discipline, and Snape's occlumency lessons had taught him to put pain somewhere it couldn't be seen. He went to Minerva's office afterward. She looked up from her marking, saw his hand and went very still. What did she use? Minerva's face did something complicated and controlled. She healed the wound carefully. The scar remained, faint but permanent. And when she spoke, her voice was precise with suppressed fury. "This is a dark object, and its use on a student is illegal. I am reporting this to Dumbledore tonight. It won't help. She has Ministry protection. Fudge won't remove her. You can't. She'll have you dismissed, and I need you here." Harry met her eyes steadily. "Umbridge is a symptom, not the disease. The Ministry is corrupt and terrified and choosing denial over truth. Removing her doesn't fix any of that. We need a different approach. What approach? We teach ourselves. Students who want real defense training meet in secret, practice what Umbridge won't teach, prepare properly for what's actually coming. A study group, but a real one. Minerva was quiet for a long moment. Then, I cannot officially endorse an unauthorized student organization. As deputy headmistress, I am required to uphold school rules. However, a pause. If students were to hypothetically form such a group, and if they were to meet in locations that a well-informed professor might mention incidentally in passing, I would find myself unable to monitor every corner of this castle at all times. She held his gaze. Do you understand me? Completely. Thank you. Umbridge is considerably more dangerous than she appears. She has ministry backing and no compunction about using dark methods to maintain control. If she discovers your group, she will destroy it and take as many people down with it as she can. Harry recruited carefully. Hermione, Ron, Neville, Luna Lovegood, Ginny Weasley, students from all 4 houses who understood that Voldemort's return meant they needed real skills, not theoretical comfort. They met in the Room of Requirement, a hidden chamber whose existence Minerva had mentioned once, entirely in passing, while discussing Hogwarts' architectural curiosities. Harry taught them everything. Disarming charms, stunning spells, shield charms, the Patronus charm, tactics, positioning, how to fight alongside someone rather than simply near them. He taught with Minerva's precision and Sirius's energy, and the specific urgency of someone who understood that this was not preparation for a hypothetical future. It was preparation for something that was already happening. Magic is only part of it, he told them during one session. My guardian has spent years telling me that. You need to think ahead. Position yourself before the fight, rather than during it. Use your environment, and never fight fair if you can avoid it. This isn't a duel with rules and points. When it matters, survival is the only objective. The DA improved rapidly. Neville, in particular, transformed, his magical confidence expanding visibly with each successful spell, his posture changing, something in his eyes becoming steadier and clearer. In February, they were betrayed. Marietta Edgecombe, under pressure from her mother's ministry connections, told Umbridge about the DA's meeting location. The Room of Requirement was raided. Umbridge arrived with her inquisitorial squad and several ministry officials, her smile at its widest. The confrontation in Dumbledore's office involved Fudge arriving personally, eager to find evidence of Dumbledore organizing student rebellion against ministry authority. Dumbledore diffused it with characteristic elegance, claiming sole responsibility for the DA and departing the school rather than be arrested, leaving Umbridge to assume the headmistress position. What followed was an occupation. Umbridge imposed rules that felt designed to crush rather than protect. No gatherings of more than 3 students, no unauthorized magic, no questioning of ministry pronouncements. Educational decrees accumulated on the walls like a paper infestation. She targeted Harry specifically, assigning detention after detention, the blood quill leaving its marks on his hand with methodical consistency. Minerva couldn't intervene directly without being removed, so she helped in the ways available to her. Healing salves delivered quietly, pain management techniques taught in careful language that kept their implications unspoken. Her simple continued presence in the castle as evidence that not everyone had surrendered. I should be protecting you better, she told him one evening, treating the latest wounds. You're protecting me the only way that keeps you here, Harry said. If you go after her directly, she wins. This is the right approach, even though we both hate it. I hate it, Minerva confirmed. I know, but the DA is still meeting. The people she caught haven't given up the rest. We're preparing, even underground. In June, Harry had a vision of Sirius being tortured in the Department of Mysteries. His first instinct, sharp and immediate, was to move. His second instinct, built by years of careful training, was to verify. He contacted Sirius directly via Floo from Umbridge's office, using a window of opportunity while she was occupied elsewhere. Sirius appeared unharmed. It was bait, Harry said flatly, processing it even as he said it. Voldemort showed me you being tortured to get me to the Department of Mysteries. He wants something there. The prophecy, Sirius said. He wants the prophecy about you. Don't fall for it, Harry. Let the Order handle it. Harry contacted Minerva instead of acting unilaterally, explaining the vision and his concern that similar tactics might be used again with an actual victim rather than a manufactured one. We need the Order watching the Department of Mysteries, he said, specifically the Hall of Prophecies. If he can't access it without encountering resistance, the tactic fails. I'll contact the Order tonight, Minerva said. They posted guards. When Voldemort's forces attempted to raid the Department of Mysteries 2 weeks later, they were met by Order members who had been waiting. The battle was intense. No prophecy was stolen. No one on the side of light died. And the Ministry could no longer maintain its denial. Death Eaters had been caught in the act of attacking Ministry property, and Voldemort himself had briefly appeared. Fudge resigned. Umbridge was removed from Hogwarts. The Wizarding World finally, and at great cost, acknowledged what Harry had been telling them for a year. The war had begun again. ### 6th year. The Horcrux revelation. The summer between 5th and 6th year was defined by the reality of open war. Death Eater attacks occurred weekly. The Daily Prophet's front pages were a consistent stream of casualties and disappearances that Harry forced himself to read because knowing the cost was part of not looking away from what he was preparing to face. He trained with Order members through the summer. Sirius taught him dueling with the intensity of someone who had been in the First War and knew exactly what it required. Kingsley Shacklebolt taught him tactical combat, not just individual spell use, but positioning, threat assessment, the management of a battlefield rather than a duel. Remus Lupin taught him about dark creatures and their countermeasures, and Minerva pushed his transfiguration work toward territory that most 7th years never approached. Human transfiguration, she said one afternoon, demonstrating briefly by transforming her own hand into something bird-like before restoring it. Extraordinarily difficult, extraordinarily dangerous. Permanent damage from errors is a real possibility. But in actual combat, the ability to transform parts of yourself, to harden your skin, to change your appearance, to escape physical restraints, it can make the difference between surviving and not. Teach me. I am teaching you. That's what we're doing. She allowed herself a small smile. You're advancing faster than anyone I've taught. By the time you're 17, you might genuinely achieve full human transfiguration, possibly an imagus transformation. That takes years. It took me 3 years. You've already mastered the theoretical groundwork. With sustained work, 2 years is realistic. In late August, Dumbledore summoned Harry to a private meeting. His expression carried the weight of someone about to offer information they know will change things permanently. Tom Riddle, Voldemort, has made himself immortal. Dumbledore said, through the darkest magic that exists. He has created Horcruxes. Harry had encountered the term without knowing its full meaning. Dumbledore explained, objects containing fragments of a soul split from the whole through the act of murder. As long as even one remained intact, Voldemort could not truly die. His body could be destroyed, his power diminished, but his soul would persist and wait. How many? Harry asked. I believe 7, including the fragments still in his body. We've already destroyed 2, the diary you eliminated in the Chamber of Secrets, and a ring I destroyed last summer at considerable cost to my hand. He displayed the blackened, clearly damaged hand, which Harry had noticed but hadn't commented on. 5 remain. Hunting and destroying them is the only path to making Voldemort genuinely mortal. What are the others? Objects connected to the Hogwarts founders, things Voldemort valued and used as vessels for his soul. A locket belonging to Slytherin, a cup belonging to Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw's diadem, Nagini, almost certainly, and one more I haven't identified with certainty. Harry sat with the full weight of this for a moment. When do we start? This year. Private lessons ostensibly about Voldemort's history and psychology, but actually about the Horcrux hunt. We'll investigate together. And Harry, Dumbledore paused, tell Professor McGonagall. She deserves to know what you'll be facing. Minerva listened to Harry's account that evening in the cottage, her face growing progressively paler as he spoke. When he finished, she was quiet for long enough that he could hear the fire. Horcruxes, she said finally. Soul murder, the darkest magic that exists. And Dumbledore expects you to hunt them. Yes. You are 16 years old. I know. You should be worrying about NEWTs and whether anyone will ask you to Hogsmeade and how to manage your Quidditch schedule, not hunting pieces of a Dark Lord's immortal soul. I know all of that, Harry said quietly. But Minerva, this is my responsibility. The prophecy exists whether I acknowledge it or not. Voldemort and I are connected. I understand him in ways other people don't. I'm the one who has to end this. He reached across and took her hand, which he rarely did, but which seemed necessary now. You've prepared me for this. Everything you've taught me, the discipline, the strategic thinking, the advanced magic, all of it, it's been building toward this. I'm ready. Minerva's eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. I raised you to survive, not to sacrifice yourself. I'm not planning to die. I'm planning to win. There's a considerable difference. 6th year's private lessons with Dumbledore used the pensieve to explore memories of Tom Riddle, his childhood, his years at Hogwarts, his transformation into Voldemort. Harry watched young Tom Riddle manipulate and murder, and felt something profoundly uncomfortable. He could follow the logic, not the morality, never the morality, but the thinking. He understood how Riddle's mind worked. That's your advantage, Dumbledore said. You can anticipate his choices. You understand his values, even as you wholly reject them. That knowledge is worth more than any spell. In December, Dumbledore had a lead on Slytherin's locket, hidden in a cave protected by dark magic of considerable sophistication. They traveled there together on a cold December night, and what followed was one of the hardest things Harry had done. The potion protecting the locket had to be consumed entirely to retrieve it. Dumbledore drank, and the effects were horrific. Visions of his worst fears, physical agony, his voice rising in pleas and commands, and fragments of sentences Harry couldn't follow. "Make me keep drinking," Dumbledore had instructed beforehand. "No matter what I say, no matter how I beg you to stop." Harry made him keep drinking. He forced potion after potion past Dumbledore's lips, while the old man screamed for things Harry couldn't give him, and did not stop until the basin was empty and the locket was in his hand. They escaped the inferior attack through fire spells and sheer desperation. Dumbledore was critically weakened. Harry got him back to Hogwarts, where Madame Pomfrey worked over him with the focused urgency of someone buying time. The locket examination, conducted with Minerva that night, confirmed it was genuine. 3 Horcruxes destroyed, Harry said. 4 remaining. In March, they destroyed the locket using fiendfire carefully contained by Dumbledore in a heavily warded chamber. The fragment of soul inside it screamed as it burned, a sound Harry did not discuss with anyone and did not sleep well for weeks after hearing. In June, Dumbledore called Harry and Minerva together for a conversation that no one in the room wanted to have. "My health has been deteriorating since the cave," Dumbledore said. "The dark magic in that potion damaged me in ways that cannot be fully healed. I have perhaps a year, perhaps less." "Don't," Minerva said immediately. "Minerva, we'll find a cure. There is no cure for dark magic at this level of sophistication. I am at peace with this. My only genuine regret is that I may not see Harry finish what we've started." "You will see it," Harry said, with a conviction he felt absolutely in his bones, "because we're going to destroy the remaining Horcruxes and kill Voldemort before that happens. I promise you." Dumbledore smiled, the sad, knowing smile of someone who has lived long enough to understand that promises don't bend the world to fit them. "Then promise me something else as well. If I die before this is finished, promise me you'll continue. Promise me you'll see it through." "I promise," Harry said.